Welcome to episode 15 of Running on OCP, where we speak with organizations using Open Compute in a variety of ways, including end users, software companies, and organizations who align to the OCP tenets. This week, I moved to Vienna, Austria, where I have the opportunity to speak with Philipp Reisner, the CEO of LINBIT. Now, LINBIT has been a leader in open source software-defined storage for over 20 years, and those familiar with the open source world would likely have heard of LINBIT and all the work that they've done around DRVD, LinStore, and other solutions. But for me, it was a great learning experience to get a chance to talk to the founder and how he started LINBIT and his view on how SDS is progressing through not only the hyperscalers, but also down through the enterprise. So I hope you enjoy this week's conversation with Philipp Reisner, the CEO of LINBIT. So thanks, Philipp. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Yeah, this is I'm always excited to speak with open source software companies because they have a unique perspective on things and the way that they approach traditional lines of businesses. So you have a very unique background in the fact that you started LINBIT. So tell everyone about your background and then how you came to start LINBIT.
Okay. Yeah, for that I need to reach back to when I graduated from university, and the story was I was looking for a topic for this. We call it diploma thesis. So that's the work you do when you graduate from it. And so I was shopping around for these topics, and in Vienna where I studied, they have this like shopping windows where they display the possible topics, and you read through them, and then that sounds interesting. Yeah. So there was one thing that stuck to me that was, replicate hard disks over the network. And as I was riding home on the bus and thinking about it, and one thought, that's boring because I know the guys who put the topic there. And then I did a little research, and then I came across, there is something called high availability, and how it was done at that time, like 23 years ago. So with shared SCSI buses and all that. And so I realized, that might be interesting. So this is how I got into it. And so then I did my diploma thesis. I graduated from university. Then we founded in the 2000s, we founded a small Linux consulting company in Vienna. But in the background, all this work on DRVD started, and DRVD is just what came out of it, replicating hard disk over the network. And
so all of this came after out of your thesis and after a long bus ride contemplating things.
Yes.
I love it. So what is LINBIT? How did you come up with the name, and what does it actually do? In simple terms for our community, what does it actually do, and what problems does it address?
Yeah, so where's the background? So it has a lot of Linux. And we started as a Linux consulting in 2000, and because at that time Linux at the data center was something new. Usually you had Solaris and AIX and the other Unixes. But as Linux became, let's say, like mainstream in the data center, we realized, we need to focus on what we do best, and that is high availability, replicating storage, and in more recent years, that's now called software-defined storage. Well, and it's a bit more than the initial thing. Yeah, so this is where LINBIT is today.
And so if I'm a company, what problems does it address and solve for a traditional enterprise?
Right. So in the really traditional enterprise, you often need so-called highly available systems. So let's say you have an important database or let's say a web shop that's really important for a business, then you would put it on 2 machines instead of 1. You install some software to make the 2 machines, or to make the service highly available that runs on the 2 machines. And we deliver that software, well, to be more precise, we deliver the packaging and the support for it, because the software itself is actually open source software. So you could literally download it from GitHub. But from GitHub, you get source code. And if you have a LINBIT subscription, you get something that is, let's say, ready to be consumed by the enterprise. So that's RPM packages in a YAM repository for the Linux distribution of your choice.
I see. Okay. Now you're talking about the market moving over the last few years toward more software-defined storage. What is your view of the current state of the storage market overall?
Yes. So this, this closely connects to cloud and everything that comes with it. So the traditional HA system, that is, let's say, a thing of the past. But still, like the majority of the banks and slowly moving clients out there is still on those systems. And the fast movers, they are already using what we call software-defined storage. So that is providing storage to, let's say, a virtualization system or a container orchestration system. So let's call the thing by the name, either to OpenStack or to Kubernetes. And yeah, so this is where the storage market moves. So in the past, the vendors needed to offer these shared storage targets so that customers can build their highly available computer systems around it. And now we have these virtualization systems, OpenStack, or in the proprietary world, that would be VMware. And in order to be able to move your workload around, you need to have centralized storage or replicated storage. And what we do, and I would say what the direction of the market is, to go away from the storage appliances and that the storage becomes a software asset. And this is exactly what we do.
And this move away from an appliance to more software defined, this would seem like it's a big challenge for enterprises who are used to doing things in a traditional way. What other challenges do you see in the market in moving this direction? Why aren't people, say, moving now, or are they moving fast enough in this direction?
Yeah, I think it has multiple aspects to it. One is on the technical side, how does the storage provisioning work, right? So a few years back, we had there is the storage team and the compute team, and then providing a new machine involved like the compute team, filed a request with the storage team. The storage team gave them a new LUN on the SAN, and the whole process took a few days. and this is definitely that needs to go away. And all the fast movers understand that. And today the whole process got replaced by a single function call to, let's say, a CSI driver, and that creates the storage volume, and it's back and ready to use in a fraction of a second. So that's happening on the technical side. And the whole enterprise needs to adopt to that, right? So you have your former storage team that now gets into new roles, the procurement, everything, the processes around it. So it's a challenge for the users, and also the vendors move along, right?
Yeah, so the storage teams themselves inside of these companies then are being redefined. Their roles and their responsibilities are being redefined. Is that correct?
Yes. So, they still need to do the purchase decisions, but their day-to-day operation that changes, right? They no longer get paper forms with a request for a new loan. Um, um, but they need to get the storage system in place and hook it up to the consuming software systems, and
Yeah, that's
that's
happening in many teams. Everyone's role is being redefined and morphing into something different with the advent of software defined. Um, how how are you viewing, or how does LINBIT work, say, between a public cloud and a private cloud option for storage? And how do you work with companies that are running a hybrid environment?
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Let me rephrase it a little bit. It is like, the customers or users that want to run the stuff on premise, and that can have multiple of reasons, like might be regulatories, other reasons, whatever. And then the users that simply go into the public cloud. And as a storage software vendor, that's two different things, because in the on-prem case, I need to deliver the software in a way that it can be consumed in that. So you literally give the software packages to the customer to be installed. And then the public cloud user, here you have other kind of challenges, like the operating system
Yeah.
image is provided by the cloud provider, so you need to integrate with that. So different ways of integration, and then the let's say, what's the term, the the big test is how to connect these worlds, right?
Right.
So let's say you have your important production in your on-prem data centers, um, but you want to have a disaster recovery system
Sure.
on public cloud, things like that. And there is a multitude of um, areas and solutions to that. So should be storage online mirrored to the public cloud. Um, is that possible in a synchronous way? Is that possible in asynchronous way? Can we do online mirroring, or does it need to be snapshot shipping? So continuous snapshot shipping. And so it's a
Are you seeing particular industries move more toward public cloud versus private, or of your customer base, how are they viewing public versus private?
mhm. Okay. Um, that's okay. That's a little bit of a difficult question for me. As a, let's say, LINBIT is a small company, so we are we have like 35 full-time equivalents, um, and I cannot identify a trend, right? So I see banks from some area going full public cloud, banks from other areas saying, "Oh, public cloud, no way," right?
Yeah.
Um,
So it depends on the customer, not necessarily an industry trend or something that everyone's a little bit different. Okay.
yeah, it's really different, and I cannot identify here a global trend. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. Now, we do we always look at these analyst predictions when they come out in the market around the growth of IT and these crazy numbers. So the one that I noticed around storage was growing 10% between, say, now and 2027, up to over 56 billion for the next generation data center market, or data storage market rather. Do you think those numbers are conservative, aggressive? Um, what do you think of that growth rate?
Yeah, I think they might be even a little bit on the conservative side. So there is really happening a lot, and we are at the end of the COVID pandemic, and invest customers start to invest again. So yes, there is a lot happening in the market.
Good. So you think it's on the low side. We can get more than
Yes.
10% growth out of it. That's good.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I won't give you a number, but I think it might be a little more.
that's fine. I won't hold you to it. I won't hold you to it. All right. Now moving toward your solutions, while people are doing a lot more open source, there are still many people that like this proprietary appliance sort of model. What makes open source storage more compelling as a strategy versus traditional legacy approach? Whether it be OpEx, CapEx, engineering time. Why are people moving toward open source when you speak with them?
Yeah, I think it's the mindset is changing, right? I think in the last 20 years, open source was going from nowhere, like it was not accepted in the data center or not being there, to now it's like the golden standard, right? Even when we look at Azure Cloud, Microsoft itself says more than 50% of the workload is running Linux. And in another article, we can read that even the switches are running Linux. So I
Yeah.
would say Linux and open source is everywhere. And the way the digital services are used everywhere in our society, that wouldn't be possible without open source. And um, how it is moving forward. And so, when I look at a stack that is used today in the data center, let's say a modern stack, it's Kubernetes. So we have Kubernetes, that's an open source component. Kubernetes needs to run on Linux, that's an open source component. And now you need to have software-defined networking to it, to have all the private networks between the containers. Would you want to be that proprietary? So for me, it no longer feels natural in this all open source stack to add proprietary pieces, bits and pieces here and there. And that's also my opinion when it comes to storage software. So I think that's no longer a fit. I cannot
I
really
like
answer it if
Yeah,
it's
Philip, I like that comment that
CapEx.
it no longer feels natural to do proprietary. I like that. I'm going to use that a lot. I like that. Uh, so one of the things at least on the hardware side, people get nervous about doing this entire lift and shift. They have to stop entirely what they're doing to say move to open source hardware. And I tell them, you can take this at bits and pieces at a time. When people are moving to your solution, how do you recommend an enterprise start to migrate toward open source storage? Is it a lift and shift, and do you need hardcore Linux engineers or an open source mindset, or can you take a traditional outfit and move them in stages over to this model?
Yeah, I would say it's this approach of going there in stages. So usually what happens is that the enterprise does something new, right? So there's a new Kubernetes platform. Okay, in Kubernetes, it's common to use software-defined storage. So let's start there, right? And then as a vendor, I always see it from the vendor side. Then you try to grow it from there, right? Say, okay, now look, now you have a year of experience with the storage on let's say Kubernetes. Why don't you? Let's talk about your storage for your virtualization platform, because you will have that around for the next 20 years probably. And the storage demands are growing there as well. So I would say it's step by step. You start with a new project, and then when you learn that it works, you go into the other areas of your company.
Well, that's good. That's a good way to approach it. And that's similar to what I say for open source hardware. Start small and start with a particular area that works best. Now, speaking of the open source hardware piece, you recently had LinStore validated to run on OCP hardware. You're the first storage software company to do this. Long term, how do you see an organization and a community like OCP and open source hardware running LINBIT being a benefit to potential enterprises?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open source guy by heart, so it was somehow natural to say, okay, let's align, let's join forces with the open source hardware world. So this is how we came up with the idea to do this certification with OCP.
And it wasn't. It was my understanding the certification process went quite smoothly with this ODM open source hardware. There wasn't anything challenging or dramatically different than other pieces of hardware, correct?
Yes, correct. And I mean that this is mainly because the storage software we do, it runs on Linux, and as long a Linux distribution runs on the hardware, we are pretty sure that our stuff will run there as well. So we are
Now,
even pretty CPU independent. So we are coming from the x86 world. We see some interest from ARM. So we made sure everything runs on ARM. It runs smoothly there. Then when you are in the enterprise world, you always have your touch points with IBM.
Yeah.
So we verified that it runs on all the IBM platforms. So open power, and even the C platform. So yes.
So at the end of the day, it's a piece of hardware, and as long as it's open to Linux, no issues.
Yes, that's my message, right? If you do some hardware stuff, make sure Linux runs on it. Then the world is open to you.
Sound advice. Now, you mentioned earlier that you're a small company with, say, 30 to 40 people, but you're not small in the deployment size here. So you have millions of worldwide users and 40 or 50 million downloads. Is that correct? Give me kind of the state of the business here with LINBIT. How big is the ecosystem and community?
Yeah. So I don't have these download numbers at the top of my head because they are so huge. But yes, with being open source, it's a challenge to measure how big the community is. So we have only indications like download numbers or numbers on mailing lists, numbers of subscribers on mailing lists, or things like that. But yes, it's huge, and I can also share that for LINBIT, being open source was like our initial marketing or way of doing marketing, right? Only with being so popular in the open source world, we were able to find customers out of that, and it by no way would have been possible to do this without being open source. I mean, creating a company of that size in this organic way. So that is very important for us.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers are staggering.
Okay.
It would seem like open source is a great way to get mind share quickly through the community angle. Now, what is next for LINBIT and the team? Any future plans or roadmap or community announcements that you would like to share?
We have the technical roadmap, of course. There are features coming. Like backing up volumes into S3 storage. I think that's coming like next week, and then federation of LINSTOR clusters. So that's also coming this summer. Then something that was still missing from our offering is to have a GUI. So and there are, our proprietary competitors have the GUIs, so we need to match that. So that's happening here on the tech side.
Good. So you're filling in a little bit of holes and then adding some functionality here on that.
Yes.
Good.
And what our customers and users are always driving us is performance, because storage hardware moves fast, right? So we got SSDs are getting faster. We got NVMe. Now Intel has these Optane drives, the 3D crosspoint technology. They're delivering, I think, already millions of IOPS in a single storage device. So as storage software, you need to optimize like crazy to keep up with that and to keep the overhead of the software small. So this is always a challenge for us, but we live in this space because we love this challenge.
Philipp, our storage project is quite active, and we've had a lot of recent contributions. One of those is actually from WD, Western Digital, on a composable API. Now, your team does a little bit of work with them as well, correct?
Yes, Steve, I'm glad that you asked that question. So the open composable API is well, it has many parts, and the storage part of it that's supported by LINSTOR already as of today. Well, since a few months. So yeah, that's already ready, and there are products in the market, and I'm happy. It's all ready to go.
So it's another example of how your team is collaborating within the community without necessarily making a hardware product. You're working very closely with Western Digital, who's leading our storage project. So it's a great example of open source community again, and you're working more just not on making sure your software runs on the box, but really around the APIs at a deeper level.
Right. And in that case, it's let's say really efficient storage targets from Western Digital that provide network attached storage. Well, block storage. So it uses NVMe over fabrics, and then LINSTOR runs on the hosts on the Linux machines, and then LINSTOR adds all the features on top of it what an enterprise would expect. Like, let's say you need to have replication between data centers, backup to S3, snapshots, and on the storage target itself, you only have the low-level parts of the stack, and everything is super high performance.
It's great, and I hope in the near future you'll see more LINBIT, LINSTOR, OCP solutions integrated as you and I continue to work together in the future. So, Philipp, I really appreciate the partnership and the collaboration that your team has shown in the last few months, and really appreciate your time today and your insights into the storage market. So I will be back with my key takeaways from my conversation with Philipp in just a minute. Thanks again, Philipp. A couple of my takeaways from my conversation today with Philipp. It's really interesting when you speak with the founder of an organization like that and his thought process about how he even started it through his academic work, and now how he's grown the company to where it is today. His view and how traditional HA is kind of a thing of the past, and how SDS is really becoming commonplace in the way that traditional organizations should be looking at storage moving forward. And how one of my favorite things throughout the conversation was how he said it no longer feels natural to put proprietary components into a solution stack. So that's something I'm certainly going to take away from that conversation about how it doesn't feel natural anymore to do things in a proprietary fashion. So I really enjoyed my conversation again with Philipp. I appreciate his time. If you have any questions about LINBIT and LINStore, as I mentioned before, it has been certified on some OCP hardware. Feel free to reach out to me at steve@opencompute. I'd be happy to introduce you to the folks at LINBIT, as well as the vendors who have certified and validated LINStore on OCP hardware. Thanks again, and be looking for more episodes of Running on OCP in the coming weeks. Cheers.